Hi, friends. I'm thinking this is playing live now. I have so many windows open. So I just wanted to do a video about uh, it's from let me pull it up here. So it's from uh, Operation Disclosure. So just look up HTTP whack semicolon whack whack operationdisclosure.blogspot.com, and I'll put the rest of the link below. And it says something, I guess it might be titled New Republic via GCR 220 points of fact. So there's 220 points of fact, but I'm just gonna gloss over some of this. And so this is by Judy Byington, Byington, 22 Faces. So she wrote this book, 22 Faces. And she is an expert. She's a social worker who works with child abuse recovery. And the website is 22faces.com and also childabuserecovery.com. So some of you who have been exploring history and maybe what's called forbidden history, or maybe more mainstream people would be calling it conspiracy theory, but I do believe forbidden history or hidden history is really more accurate. So I'm just going to read nearly 450 years ago, quote, nearly 450 years ago, the Anglo-Saxon world banking system began with the creation of the Vatican historical asset trust accounts, known as global collateral accounts. These funds of sovereign countries were mainly backed by gold reserves of the ancient Chinese royal dragon families. Certain sovereign families of Asia and Europe had pooled their assets into a series of very complex and secret off-ledger private banking trust accounts. The monies were intended for humanitarian projects to help the world for the better, though had been fraudulently abused by a corrupt global banking system since at least the late 1600s. So for those of you who have been exploring what I'm calling hidden history or forbidden history, we know that it seems like bankers and actually insurance companies are really some of the pirates, the biggest pirates or gangsters, mobsters that have been destroying the world. And, we think of bankers and insurance companies as like respectable, boring things, which might be their intent, to be so kind of unremarkable that we don't even notice them, which, that's what better way for your enemy for like a murderer to be is than somebody who's boring and unremarkable. So, of course, I'm not saying every banker and insurance guy, is that, but it does seem like a lot of people like a lot of the trusted agents of the public good are actually just gatekeepers of this like population control. Actually, I would say population control and like quality of life permission giver. Of course, these terms I'm just making off the top of my head, but so it talks about this Vatican historical asset trust accounts. So for those of us who are exploring the forbidden history about like finances, we know that everything goes to the Vatican, that the Vatican kind of runs the world financially. And of course, people know that the Vatican City is its own country. London itself is its own country. DC is its own country. And the Vatican, so I think like DC runs the military, London runs the finances, and the Vatican, I'm not sure what that one I mean, we know that it's about human trafficking, and yeah, I mean, maybe the Vatican runs like the propaganda, um, but it says so that Vatican historical asset trust account is known as global collateral accounts. Now, I think that's interesting. It's called global, right? The globalists are what's causing people on Earth so much grief. Um, so I think that's telling. And uh, so these funds of sovereign countries were mainly backed by gold reserves of the ancient Chinese royal dragon families. Now, for those who are studying like the forbidden history or the hidden history of the supernatural side of things, or the um, other creatures that exist on this planet and that exist on this planet. So when we look at dragons, and then in Indian, East Indian tradition or myth, there's what's called the naga, which are these serpents. Okay, these really powerful, large serpents. Um, and if we look at things biblically, there was the serpent in the Garden of Eden that uh, cajoled Eve to eat from the tree of good and evil. I think it was. So I just want to say that every uh, like culture has had supernatural encounters with these large serpents, and it could be, one could call it a dragon, we could call it a serpent. I am no expert on this, but I just want to note that there might be some sort of parallel between these naga, these wise serpents, these talking serpents, these godlike, like supernatural serpents that could be a dragon, and hence when a royal family is, like has an affiliation with a dragon, that they consider themselves a dragon. New Earth that did a really excellent video about how in the Middle Ages, when people were wearing armor, there were possibly serpents wearing armor because they never took off the armor. They got food fed, just the food was thrown down the opening of the face shield. Nobody saw the um, who was in the armor, and she goes into more in depth than I'm doing here. But uh, so when these folks are saying that they are of a serpent lineage, um, there may be people who are of a serpent lineage, and who knows if um if humans, because the Bible does refer to a worm. And I was watching another video where they were saying that caduceus, that the staff with the thing twined around it, they were saying we've always thought it was a snake, but somebody was saying no, it's a worm. And who knows, because our gastrointestinal system, begins at the mouth and ends at the end. And I mean, maybe that's a serpent like structure. So who knows if that is somewhat related to, you know like being connected with Satan or something like that. I don't know. um but my point is that these reserves were backed by a dragon family, a serpent family. And no offense to these people, these human beings, whoever is alive now. I'm not saying they're satanic or whatever, but like these lineages, when there's an affiliation with dragons and serpents, uh, I would say there's probably something of Satan, who is an entity and it's real, and that's the ruler of Earth. So um, so I just feel like this is disclosure that like the dragon was backing the Vatican. That's what I read. So it says certain sovereign families of Asia and Europe have pooled their assets into a series of very complex and secretive off-ledger private banking trust accounts. The monies were intended for humanitarian projects, and of course, it probably wasn't intended for humanitarian projects. That's the thing about all of these powerful people, these powerful companies. Everybody says they do this lip service. We're going to help, like Bill Gates, we're going to help Africa. And we're not going to give them food, clothing, technology. We're going to inject them. That's it. That's all they want to give. They want to mess around with the bloodstream of little babies, the mothers. And I don't know how people are fine with that, but you see that, like, they know what the public wants to hear, and they'll kill the people, and the public is so blind. And I guess it's part of the grand delusion Almighty Father God gives people, is if you're not in touch with God, if you don't have Jesus in your life, in some way, you're going to be deluded. You're going to go towards the person that's trying to murder you and your children. And it's interesting. Like, I know some people are like, I don't have Jesus in my life, but I can tell. I think like some people have Jesus in their life and they don't even realize it. Because I know people who are kind of super unreligious, and they're really aware. So I don't understand how that works. But let's continue. In 1694, this global monetary system, overseen by a secretive cabal, was being run out of a central bank in England, controlled by the Rothschilds family. And the Rothschilds say that Baron Nathan Mayer Rothschild declared he controlled the British money supply. By the late 1700s of Eastern Europe, these dark forces had gained complete control of the planet's wealth by secretively taking over world assets through an invisible web of usury and fiat finance. The cabal's influence upon greedy global leaders led to domination over the world's military, diplomacy, education, science, and media systems. So I don't know if that sentence is actually grammatically correct, because that doesn't make sense. By the mid to late 1700s of Eastern Europe. But anyways, if we're looking at, in terms of the Tartarian mud flood, forbidden history research, 1700s, it seems like the 1600s, 1700s was a significant change. I believe the Magna Carta, something was done with the Magna Carta, and the Vatican, was it 1600s? So, and some folks in the forbidden history research say that pre-1900 was like a golden age. And I remember reading something about the 1800s was the end of the Belle Epoque, because it does seem like the 1800s, the 1800s was a really nice, 1700 to 1800 things seem to be kind of idyllic. And just with World War I, that was like devastating. I mean, but I know there was things going on in the 1800s too. So I will continue. In 1871, the cabal created the Corporation of the U.S. So 1871, the United States, the corporation, the business called the United States was created in 1871 to work under orders of the World Monetary Organizations, International Monetary Fund, World Trade Organization. Oh, wait. In 1871, the cabal created the Corporation of the United States to work under orders of the World Monetary Organizations, International Monetary Fund, World Trade Organization, Bank of International Settlements, North American Union, Council on Foreign Relations, Committee of 300, and the Trilateral Commission. Okay, so that was set up in 1891. Did you guys know that? In 1891, like 200 years ago? So they discarded the U.S. Constitution, manipulated funds of central banks across the globe, and eventually formed the U.S. Federal Reserve to continue their plunder of global assets. This privately owned U.S. Incorporated, U.S. Federal Reserve, and U.S. Treasury were designed to conform to dictates of those loyal to Masonic orders such as Skull and Bones, blah, blah, blah. I'm having a hard time. I have had a concussion and stuff, so it's like hard for me to focus on text for a long time. But so, anyways, I just think that is pretty interesting, and I encourage you to take a look at this. So this is since 2021, eyewitnesses to human trafficking was testified before the International Common Law Court of Justice in Brussels. So a criminal syndicate based in Italy supplied indigent children for use in satanic sacrifice. They worked through the Vatican Office of Catholic Charities, Jesuit Superior General, or the U.S., Netherlands, and European government and church-owned foster daycare and youth detention centers. One of the most horrific examples was the Canadian child genocide. There's a documentary about it called Unrepentant. So I'll put that in the details, the video description here. So there's a lot of evidence about satanic ritual abuse that is going on. And the thing is, like, notice we started off talking about financial stuff, and then it goes into satanic ritual abuse. And so finances and satanic ritual abuse, folks, Satan is the ruler of earth, and he gives boons. You know, he pays people, but he requires sacrifice of children for this profit. So the most influential of their cabal organizations is the primarily privately owned U.S. Federal Reserve. As we know, the Federal Reserve is not federal. It's not of the U.S., United States. It's not a reserve. It's not a bank. It's like its own business. So, blah blah blah. 1999 NASARA Act, the National Economic Stabilization and Recovery Act, National Economic Security and Reformation Act. It was trying to correct the situation. It came about from a 1993 ruling of the Supreme Court after 30 years of lawsuits by the Farmers Union, which was successful. So in that lawsuit, the U.S. banking system and U.S. government was found to be in collusion to defraud the U.S. citizens. So interesting. That's so. That's crazy, isn't it? I didn't know that the Supreme Court ruled this, but so it's clear that everybody who's in charge is a criminal. Let me say that again. Everybody who's in charge is a criminal. So, anyways, Nasara is just ignored by the year 2000, and to avoid a global monetary crisis, a reset of world currencies was apparent. So there was a global currency reset in 2016. And so that reset would restore a new U.S. republic that functioned under Nasara law and within the original constitution. U.S. citizens would be given their own gold-backed currency along with much needed changes to the U.S. tax and banking systems. The reset began playing out. So, blah, 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 history of that process. So I guess a new U.S. republic was founded or established, formed, integrated into the Federal Reserve, revaluation of currencies. I don't understand all of this, and I'm having a hard time reading. Okay. So apparently, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts, and President Bush Sr. stole up to $9.1 trillion of funds from the Treasury. Henry Kissinger was the mastermind. By 2008, it's just amazing. So I'm just reading. Okay, so that Washington, D.C. itself had no right in constitutional law to run America. Washington, D.C. was a system of corporate scams constructed to milk the American people without their knowing. The United States was not even the United States of America. Data retrieved spelled slow death for D.C. ruling class, especially when the U.S. long-lost Nasara legislation was ruled valid by the U.S. Supreme Court. Repeated attempts to pay off the debt, U.S. debt, using the $800 trillion, blah, 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 was thwarted by the cabal. The funds were in European bank accounts. So there's a documentary about this corruption of the Federal Reserve. It's called Eagle One to Wanta, WANTA. So you just go to Eagle One to Wanta, all one word, on the net to see the documentary. And there's a documentary film about the U.S. monetary system, blah, blah, blah. Cool. And if they don't have a title for it, but it was about the assassination of President Kennedy. So you can just go to the link to this document and you can find that link to that documentary. So the Federal Reserve was started 450 years ago with the creation of a Vatican trust account. And okay, repeating here. The ancient Royal Dragon Society was an organization of old families within China and Taiwan who operated above the political divide of the two independent Chinese governments. Dragon families were said to abstain from any public view and knowledge, but acted for the benefit of the world. They accumulated great wealth. In the late 1700s, a group in Eastern Europe known as the Cabal began taking control of the global monetary system using fiat or paper currency that was not asset-backed. To counter this movement, some sovereign families of Asia and Europe, dominated by the Chinese royal dragon families, pooled their gold assets into secret off-ledger private banking trusts, now known as the Global Collateral Accounts or Global Debt Facility, which I don't really understand that, but so it sounds like, I mean, like Eastern Europe, like when you think of Eastern Europe, I mean, I'm thinking of like, Slovenia, Bulgaria. I mean, I don't understand how, I mean, like Eastern Europe is not really a powerhouse. Czechoslovakia, I mean, these are not what I would think of as the cabal. And so anyways, we do not know everything for a fact here. So this is just interesting information. On the darker side, Switzerland, the home and legal origin of the United Nations charters, housed cabal organizations of the International Monetary Fund, World Trade Organization, and Bank of International Settlements. In the U.S., the cabal operated monetary system went back to founding of the United States of American Corporation in 1871, reorganization in 1907, Jekyll Island in 1910, and forming the Federal Reserve in 1913. They discarded the Constitution, manipulated funds of central banks across the globe, used the U.S. Federal Reserve to plunder global assets rather than utilizing the monies for their original humanitarian purposes, thereby enriching their own and fellow global elites' pockets. Since the U.S. monetary system began, it's been subject to the privately owned U.S. Incorporated and U.S. Federal Reserve, plus other cabal organizations, including the Khazarian Mafia. Cabal monies were commonly laundered through the Vatican Bank. So the U.S. Federal Reserve functioned under orders of the Monetary Fund. Corrupt system was run by political elite secret society members whose allegiance to Masonry included blah, blah, blah. So the BAR stands for British Accredited Regency. The City of London Crown Temple Bar also controlled the U.S. judiciary system. So that's why the court system it's not American, because it's the British law here on American soil. So why have the Crown, which is this corporation that's corrupt corporation from London? Why have a corrupt corporation from London, the Crown, this creepy evil crown, be making decisions about your life? Why go into a ritual Freemasonic room that has like a judge like sitting on a throne? Why participate in a British ritual? I like English tea. I like the notion of a cup of tea and charming English stuff, but I don't want to participate in their magical rituals, which they call law. The British accredited regency, excuse me. Okay, so in the War of 1812, British soldiers destroyed copies of the Titles of Nobility Amendment because it prevented anyone who had ties to the Crown of England from holding public office. U.S. attorneys gave oath to the Crown Temple Bar of England in order to become licensed under practices of the U.S. Bar Association. So, U.S. attorneys give oath to the Crown Temple Bar of England. The U.S. Bar Association was owned by the Northern Trust Company, which eventually also owned as a holding company the U.S. taxpayer system of the Internal Revenue Service. So the Northern Trust Company owns the IRS. For all intents and purposes, the IRS and U.S. Bar Association functioned as the same entity under the control of the Vatican and Crown of England. So, I guess then the Northern Trust Company must be owned by the Vatican and the Crown. And understand, the Crown isn't Queen Elizabeth or the Crown is actually it's just an organization. It's like the Federal Reserve, but it's they call it the Crown, and it's just a business in London that seems to run everything. So isn't that interesting? So if the Bar Association is owned by the Vatican, the IRS is owned by the Vatican, right? So why would you want to participate in something that is run by the Vatican? And I hear that the United States Postal Service is actually run from Switzerland. I don't really understand it, but in the American Civil War, 1861 to 65, both sides were founded by the Crown Temple in London. And so because of the agreement between the Vatican, the Crown, the U.S. Bar Association, IRS, it was important to have Roman Catholics placed in ruling positions in the United States, the Supreme Court. After all, okay, this mess, which continued today, came about in 1871 when a privately owned United States of America corporation was secretly and covertly founded for the purpose of controlling the U.S. monetary system. The corporation was simply a privately owned maritime corporation out of Puerto Rico using the funding of the Royal Dragon families. So, see, so they make it seem, so there's the cabal apparently from Eastern Europe, which I believe the Eastern Europeans are intelligent people and stuff, but I just find this is like the first time I've ever heard that there's a cabal from Eastern Europe. I can imagine a cabal from Russia or France, but Eastern Europe, like trying to destroy the whole world, like that just doesn't seem coherent with the culture, just the historical trends. I know stuff happens in Eastern Europe, like when Franz Ferdinand was shot and stuff like that, but it just doesn't seem to resonate. But that this privately owned maritime corporation of the United States of America was funded by the royal dragon families. I could imagine that. Um, and here, this is. I mean, it's because the beginning of this text, this paper, it makes it seem like the royal dragon families were the good guys, fighting the bad guys or whatever. But it's just like this is pretty messed up. Seems bad. Um, so Jekyll Island. So in 1910, at Jekyll Island, Georgia, the U.S. corporation fraudulently put together this monetary system as an omnipotent fiat dollar making machine. This was involved J.P. Morgan, National Citibank president Frank Vanderlip. The group met, in New Jersey. 1913, they became Federal Reserve, served as U.S. Central Bank. Congress was bought off by signing the Constitutional Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Evil Wilson, oh my gosh, signed it into law. As an act of treason, the Congress allowed Federal Reserve to print money. So it's interesting. So Congress was committed treason in 1913. This is like so alarming. It's like, how did America survive this long? And the Fed alone was allowed to have full global monetary authority over the rest of the world. So the Federal Reserve was not connected to the U.S. government, comprised of privately owned central banks that served the cabal. The Federal Reserve was a franchisee of the Kazran banking mafia, known as Rothschild World Money Changers. They were known for creating money from nothing and lending it to 98% of the world's nations in order to receive pernicious usury in exchange. This is just so demonic. Fought implementation. I'm just trying to see if every point here is really a significant point. So the United States was the only country on the planet that did not have its own national currency. So the Federal Reserve notes that were used by the common U.S. citizens had no banking at all and were referred to as fiat currency. Fiat currency was any non-asset-backed money declared by the government to be legal tender. And of course, U.S. citizens have been forced to buy their Federal Reserve note currency along with paying interest on it from privately owned Federal Reserve, from the Federal Reserve. And there's more, but I can't comprehend and read it all anymore. So maybe I should just wrap this up. And but I recommend taking a look at this document. It's pretty illuminating. So the corrupt financial system came to an end, or came to a head. It came to a head at the end of World War II. A mind control program called MK Ultra was begun upon importing Nazi scientists, mind control scientists. Wow, the Nazis helped design the philosophy. And it's not just a philosophy, it's an occult, satanic religion. It's interesting they call it a philosophy because the Nazis created the satanic, like brought in the satanic religion upon the creation of the CIA. That's what I would rephrase that. And the US dollars paid for this, and like developing this. George H.W. Bush was influential in forming the CIA. Oh my gosh. In 2010, the New York Times reported that Joseph Mengele was given a safe haven in the U.S. through the CIA project paperclip. Oh my gosh, that's so. Oh my goodness. Oh, that's so horrible. MK Ultra was heavily involved in human experiments to torture children into multiple personalities through satanic ceremonies of pedophilia and child sacrifices. So just know your tax-paying dollars paid for people to abuse children through satanic sacrifices to create multiple personalities, kill and rape children. Okay. Global elites, and I'll call them the globalists or the global parasites, including those in the banking system, and I would also include the insurance system, were known to regularly hold satanic child exploitation ceremonies for the purpose of gaining power and privilege. How they gain power and privilege is because this is satanic. Satan gives power and privilege. And the way Satan gives power and privilege is destroying children. Is horror. It's like causing great suffering to children. That's how one gains power and privilege with Satan. A Canadian mind control victim gave details about child genocide in 2012 hearings at the International Common Law Court of Justice in Brussels. She was an eyewitness to murders of 7 other children during her 2-year childhood stint at Canadian Air Force Base known as Lincoln Park in Calgary, Alberta. She was a victim of a CIA-funded mind control program to develop super spies. So if you go to this document that I put in the details section or in the description section, you can find that. It's item number 45. So there's more about that. Many other witnesses about that. And they're referring to a Dr. Green, which is I believe that's so that's Dr. Joseph Mengele. So he just changed his name. So he tortured all these children to try to create super spies. The U.S. government gave Mengele $50 million to run MK Ultra, and they torture children with electroshock, radiation, drugs, isolation in water, so isolation tanks, sexual abuse, sleep deprivation, burns, emotional and physical abuse, atrocities, and it was performed on countless other children. And I would say MK Ultra is now going on worldwide. And it's this child sacrifice. So human child sacrifice is not just killing and violating children in by the actual globalists. Right now, the child sacrifice that's going on is parents that are getting their children's gender changed, like 4-year-olds or toddlers, altering um, the reproductive uh, organs. That is that is very satisfying to Satan. To have a child violating, to have a parent violating its child, uh, desecrating the child. Um, Satan likes that. To suffocate your child, Satan really likes that, because when you're suffocating your child, you're depriving the child of oxygen. You're exposing the child to the waste products that our exhalation is supposed to do. So when parents are desecrating the child, when grandparents are desecrating the child, when teachers are desecrating the child, or airplane stewardesses are trying to suffocate the child, or nurses and doctors are trying to suffocate the child, or inject the child, poison the child, kill the child. That's all part of the whole child sacrifice ritual, because Satan likes to create suffering in children. So MK Ultra has exploded, and it's out in the open. Um, yeah. So so MK Ultra is like it's it's uh it's going on right now, folks. This is not just in the '60s, and it's probably in TV shows and stuff, and we don't even know it. Okay, so the cabal's satanic practices and evil purposes under the protection of the CIA and mafia led to the acceptance and availability of easy credit by the privately owned central banks and Federal Reserve. So, so Satan gave money. That's what I would say. I would interpret that. The immoral practices soon created the fiat U.S. dollar. Since the 1944 Bretton Woods Conference at the end of World War II had functioned as a primary world currency, this resulted in global economic to function. Oh, I can't even understand all this. Okay, blah. So basically, money and child human sacrifice. If you just go through this, it's money and child human sacrifice. That's what's going on. That's what makes the world go around. And I always thought this to be the case. Um, it's clear to me that child human trafficking makes the world go round. Why? Because Satan, that's Satan's ruler of the world, and what Satan wants is the destruction of children's innocence and suffering, children's suffering, and violation of children. Because yes, a child could have cancer or something and the child would suffer, but no, like the betrayal. That's what Satan seems to like, the betrayal and tremendous violation of children. That's what Satan feeds off of. And when humans will give Satan the tremendous suffering and betrayal of children, then Satan will give that human being and whoever is associated with it. Satan will give that person money and power, and more humans will do that. They'll just kill the children, rape the children, torture the children, for a long time, because it's like it's not necessarily that the children get out, like just get killed at one time. Like for some, if the child delivers a certain type of energy or whatever, the child is farmed, basically. Like that's what human trafficking is. It's the farming of them, for just the worst, the most inhumane, most unjust, despicable, horrible things. That's what's at play. That's what this whole world lockdown thing is about, is to facilitate this trafficking and to make it easier for them, and also, just it feeds the demons all the suffering that the lockdowns causes. So, anyways, my brain is so fried right now, but I just thought this was an important piece of information. So, God bless.